The hospital room smelled like antiseptic and broken promises. I lay there, still weak from 36 hours of labor, holding my newborn daughter against my chest. My body ached in places I didn't know could hurt. The door creaked open and Caleb walked in. My husband, the father of the tiny baby sleeping in my arms. His face was pale. His eyes wouldn't meet mine. He stood there in the doorway like he was afraid to come closer. "I can't do this, Megan," he said quietly. His voice was flat, emotionless. I didn't sign up for this kind of life. I thought he was just overwhelmed. New fathers got scared sometimes, right? This was normal panic. But then he reached into his pocket and pulled out his wedding ring. The gold band I'd slipped onto his finger 3 years ago, promising forever. He dropped it onto my food tray. It hit the plastic with a sharp, cold sound that made my daughter flinch in her sleep. "I'm sorry," he said. But he didn't sound sorry. He sounded relieved. Then he turned and walked out. Just like that. The door closed behind him with a soft click. The nurse hadn't even come back yet. I was still bleeding, still stitched up, still barely able to sit. And my husband had just walked away from both of us. My name is Megan Walsh, and that was the night I learned you can die while still breathing. I lay there in that hospital bed, staring at the ceiling tiles, while my daughter made small sounds against my chest. The nurses moved around me quietly. They wouldn't look me in the eyes. They knew. Somehow they all knew what had just happened. I was 29 years old. I had exactly $800 in my personal account. I had a newborn baby who needed me. And I had just become both a mother and an abandoned wife in the same night. The ring was still sitting on my food tray. I picked it up with shaking fingers and held it up to the fluorescent lights. 3 years of marriage. 3 years of believing in us. And it all came down to this small circle of gold, discarded like trash. He'd left before they even cut the hospital bracelet off my wrist. Left before our daughter had a name officially recorded on her birth certificate. Left before I could even stand up on my own. That's the moment I realized that the man I'd married had never really existed at all. I kept thinking about what his mother had said at our engagement dinner 2 years earlier. We'd been at an expensive restaurant, the kind with cloth napkins and waiters who spoke in whispers. Caleb's mother had raised her wine glass and smiled at me across the table. "You're very sweet, Megan," she'd said. Her voice was smooth and sharp at the same time. "But you should know that ambition runs in our family's blood. Caleb needs someone who can keep up with him. Someone who matches his drive." I'd laughed it off at the time. Thought she was just being protective of her son. Caleb had squeezed my hand under the table and changed the subject. But he'd never defended me. Never told his mother that I was enough. That I was exactly who he wanted. Now, lying in that hospital bed with his ring burning a hole in my palm, I understood. She'd been warning me. Telling me I would never be good enough for her son. And Caleb had been listening to her all along. The signs had been there. I'd just been too in love to see them. Coming home from the hospital was like walking into a ghost house. The apartment felt empty even though it was full of things. I carried my daughter in her car seat, moving slowly because everything still hurt. The nursery door was open. I stopped in the doorway and felt my stomach drop. The crib was only half assembled. Tools were scattered on the floor. Moving boxes were still stacked in the corner, unopened. We'd been planning to finish it together after the baby came. But now there was no together. It was just me. I walked to our bedroom, each step sending pain through my body. The closet door was open. Caleb's side was completely empty. All his clothes were gone. His shoes. His laptop. Even the framed photo from our wedding that used to sit on the dresser. The only thing he'd left behind was a yellow sticky note on the kitchen counter. I picked it up with trembling hands. It said in his neat handwriting, "I'll send the divorce papers soon." That was it. No explanation. No apology. Just a promise of paperwork to make our ending official. I crumpled the note in my fist and finally let myself cry. The first 2 weeks were the darkest of my entire life. My daughter cried constantly. Cried almost as much. I couldn't sleep because she needed to eat every 2 hours. I couldn't eat because my stomach was twisted in knots. My milk came in and I leaked through every shirt I owned. The stitches pulled and burned every time I moved. The apartment was a disaster. Dishes piled up in the sink. Laundry covered every surface. I lived in the same stained hospital gown for 3 days straight because I was too exhausted to change. My phone kept ringing. My mother called every day, her voice tight with worry and something else. Disappointment, maybe. "You always said you'd handle things your way, Meg," she said during one call. "I hope you're still sure about that." I wanted to scream at her. To tell her that I hadn't chosen this. That my way had been stolen from me by a man who'd promised forever and delivered nothing. Instead, I just hung up. One night, around 3 in the morning, I stood in the middle of the living room holding my screaming daughter, and I screamed too. Just screamed into the darkness until my throat was raw. Not from hate. From heartbreak. From the crushing weight of being completely alone. 3 months later, I moved out of the apartment. I couldn't afford the rent on my own, and every corner reminded me of Caleb. Of the life I'd thought we were building. My late grandmother had left me her house in her will. It was small and old on the edge of town. The wallpaper was peeling in the hallways. The floors creaked with every step. The kitchen was barely big enough for one person. But it was mine. Free and clear. No rent. No landlord. Just a roof over our heads. I moved in with whatever fit in my old car. The baby's bassinet went in the corner of the living room because there wasn't really a second bedroom. Just a tiny room that was more like a closet. I set up a folding table in the kitchen and called it my workspace. That first night in the new house, I sat on the floor holding my daughter and looked around at the peeling paint and water stains on the ceiling. "No one's coming to save us," I whispered to her. She just looked at me with those big, trusting eyes. "I have to build something. Something that's ours." And in that moment I made a decision. I would never depend on anyone else again. Never wait for someone to rescue me. I would do it myself. I found my grandmother's old sewing kit in the attic one afternoon. It was in a wooden box covered in dust, filled with needles and thread and scraps of fabric. I'd been folding baby blankets, trying to keep my hands busy so my mind wouldn't wander to dark places. The blankets were cheap, thin things from the discount store. They'd already started pilling after just a few washes. I pulled out a piece of soft linen from the sewing kit and ran my fingers over it. Before I'd met Caleb, before I'd convinced myself to be practical and get a regular office job, I used to make things. Quilts and pillows and little decorations. Loved it. But Caleb had called it a hobby. Something cute but unrealistic. "You can't build a life on crafts," he'd said once, laughing. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with that scrap of linen and started stitching. Just simple designs at first. Trying to remember the patterns my grandmother had taught me years ago. My daughter slept in her bassinet next to me. And for the first time in months, I felt something other than pain. I felt possibility. When I finished the small blanket, I took a photo and posted it online. Just to share. Not expecting anything. One comment appeared almost immediately. "Do you sell these?" My heart skipped a beat. That first sale felt like magic. A stranger on the internet wanted to pay me $30 for something I'd made with my own hands. I stayed up until 2 in the morning making another blanket exactly like the first one. I packaged it carefully in tissue paper and wrote a thank you note by hand. When I dropped it at the post office the next morning, my hands were shaking. Within a week, I had 3 more orders. Then 5. Then 8. I set up a simple online shop and called it Willow and Company. Willow was my grandmother's name. The woman who'd taught me to sew. The woman who'd left me this house when everyone else had given up on me. I worked between feedings and diaper changes. I sewed during naps and late at night when the house was quiet. My fingers were constantly sore. My back ached from hunching over the sewing machine. But every time I shipped an order, every time someone left a kind review, I felt stronger. I'd whisper to my daughter while I worked, "It's just us, baby. But maybe that's enough." And slowly I started to believe it. Maybe we didn't need anyone else. Maybe we could build a life on our own. One stitch at a time. My best friend from college, Natalie, showed up at my door one Saturday morning with her arms full of boxes. "I heard about the business," she said, pushing past me into the house. "And I'm here to help whether you want me to or not." She'd brought fabric samples, packaging supplies, and 3 different types of coffee. We spent the entire day at my kitchen table, organizing inventory and planning designs. Natalie had always been good at the business side of things. She helped me set up proper bookkeeping and showed me how to calculate profit margins. "You're building something real, Meg," she said as we worked. "I can see it. You just need to believe in it too." I wanted to cry, but I held it together. "I'm trying," I said. "It's just hard to believe in anything after everything that happened." Natalie grabbed my hand across the table. "He was an idiot who didn't deserve you. But this." She gestured at the blankets and pillows covering every surface. "This is yours. He can't take it away. No one can." That was the first time since Caleb left that I felt truly seen. Not pitied. Not judged. Just understood. It gave me the strength to keep going even when I wanted to give up. A mutual acquaintance from Caleb's friend group sent me a message a few months later. I almost didn't open it. I'd been avoiding anything connected to my old life. But curiosity got the better of me. The message included a link to Caleb's social media. He'd posted photos from some fancy restaurant. His arm around a woman I didn't recognize. The caption said something about new beginnings, and finding someone who matches my ambition. The woman was thin and polished, wearing expensive clothes. She looked like the kind of person who'd never had a hair out of place or spent a night crying on the bathroom floor. The message from the mutual friend said, "Thought you should know. He's been telling people you were too domestic for his goals. That you wanted to trap him with a baby. Just wanted you to hear it from someone who knows the truth." My hand shook so hard I almost dropped my phone. Rage flooded through me, hot and sharp. But underneath the rage was something colder. Determination. I deleted the message. Blocked the friend. Closed the app. Then I went back to my sewing machine and worked until my fingers were numb. That's when my silent revenge truly began. I would build something so successful that he'd choke on his words. And I'd do it without ever mentioning his name. 6 months after I started Willow and Company, I filed for a trademark. Cost most of my savings to hire a lawyer and go through the process. But I did it anyway. Because filing that trademark felt like claiming something permanent. Something that was mine and mine alone. Something Caleb couldn't touch even if he tried. The day the approval came through, I cried happy tears for the first time since giving birth. My daughter was sitting in her high chair, smashing banana pieces with her fists and laughing. I held up the official paperwork and showed it to her. "Look, baby," I said. "We're real now. We're official." She just giggled and threw banana at me. But it felt like the most important moment of my life. I was building something that would last. Something. With my name on it. Not his. Not anyone else's. Just mine. That night, I hung the trademark certificate on the wall above my sewing machine. Every time I looked at it while working, I felt a surge of pride. Done this. Me. The woman Caleb said was too domestic. Too ordinary. Too focused on diapers to keep up with his ambition. I was proving him wrong with every stitch. Everything changed when a local mom blogger bought one of my blankets. She had a huge following, thousands of people who trusted her recommendations. She posted a photo of her baby wrapped in my blanket with a caption about supporting small businesses and handmade quality. Within hours, my shop was flooded with orders. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing with notifications. The little inventory I had was sold out in minutes. I sat at my kitchen table staring at the screen, watching the orders pile up, and I started crying. Not from stress. From joy. Pure, overwhelming joy. For the first time since Caleb left, I felt like maybe I was going to be okay. No, not just okay. Maybe I was going to be successful. That night, I stayed up until dawn fulfilling orders. My daughter slept in her pack and play next to my workspace. Every time I finished packaging another blanket, I felt stronger, more capable, more like myself than I had in years. When the sun came up, I looked at my reflection in the kitchen window. I looked exhausted. My hair was a mess and I had bags under my eyes. But I was smiling, really smiling, because for the first time I could see a future. A real one. And it was beautiful. The business side of things was overwhelming at first. I'd never done taxes for a business before. Didn't understand profit margins or quarterly payments or any of the legal requirements. But I refused to give up. I spent my nights after my daughter went to sleep teaching myself everything. I watched online tutorials about bookkeeping. I read articles about small business management. I filled out spreadsheets until my eyes crossed. Every number I entered felt like taking back control of my life. Caleb used to handle all our finances when we were married. He'd made me feel stupid whenever I asked questions about money. Made me feel like I couldn't understand numbers or planning or anything important. But now I was learning it all on my own. And I was good at it. The spite fueled me some nights. I'd think about his voice saying, "You can't build a life on crafts," and I'd work harder, calculate better, plan smarter. "Watch me," I'd whisper to the empty room. "Just watch me build something you never thought I could." And bit by bit, month by month, the business grew. The numbers got bigger. The future got brighter. And I got stronger. A year after I started Willow & Company, I made enough money to reinvest in the business properly. I hired a graphic designer to create a real logo, something clean and professional. Then I hired a photographer to take better pictures of my products. But the most important decision I made was hiring help. I put out a call for part-time workers, specifically targeting single mothers like me. Women who needed flexible hours and understanding bosses. Women who knew what it was like to juggle everything alone. 3 women showed up for interviews. All of them had babies or small children. All of them had stories that sounded too much like mine. I hired all 3 of them. We worked out of my tiny house at first, packing boxes in the living room while our kids played together on the floor. The house was chaos. Fabric everywhere. Packages stacked to the ceiling. Children crying and laughing. But it was the best kind of chaos. For the first time since Caleb left, the house was full of laughter again. Full of life and hope and women supporting each other. We were building something together. Something that mattered. Not just a business. Community. Family made from broken pieces. I received official notice from the court about child support around that time. Caleb's name was on the paperwork. There was a legal requirement for him to pay, but the document showed he'd requested a delay. He was between jobs, according to his lawyer. Too busy to contribute to his own daughter's life. I stared at that paperwork for a long time. Part of me wanted to fight it. To drag him to court and make him pay for abandoning us. But another part of me realized something important. I didn't need his money anymore. Willow & Company was supporting us just fine. Better than fine, actually. We were comfortable, stable, thriving. His child support would have been a few $100s a month. I was making more than that in a single day now. So I signed the acknowledgement and sent it back without fighting. Let him think he'd gotten away with something. Let him believe he was off the hook. The truth was simpler and more powerful than that. I didn't need him. Not his money. Not his presence. Not his approval. My daughter and I were building a life without him. And that life was becoming more beautiful every single day. He was just a footnote now. A painful chapter that was already closing. I attended my first baby products trade show when my daughter was 18 months old. Natalie stayed with her while I drove 3 hours to the convention center in the city. I was terrified. These were real buyers from major stores. Corporate representatives with budgets and contracts and expectations. I was just a woman who sewed blankets in her grandmother's old house. But I set up my booth with shaking hands. Displayed my products as beautifully as I could. And I smiled at every person who walked by, even though my stomach was doing flips. A woman from a boutique chain stopped at my booth around noon. She picked up one of my blankets and examined it closely. felt the fabric, checked the stitching, asked questions about my production capacity and my pricing. Then she pulled out a business card. "I want to place an order," she said, "for all 32 of our locations." I almost fainted right there. That single order was worth more than I'd made in the entire first year of business. That night, I called Natalie from my hotel room and cried happy tears. "We did it," I kept saying. "We actually did it." When I got home, I held my daughter close and whispered, "Your mama's building something real, baby. Something that's going to take care of us forever." 2 years after Caleb left, Willow and Company products were in stores across the entire country. My blankets and nursery items were featured in parenting magazines. Mommy bloggers tagged me in their posts. A major news outlet did an article calling me the mom who turned heartbreak into an empire. I read that headline 3 times, sitting at my new, bigger workspace in the house. An empire seemed like too big a word for what I'd built. But when I looked around at the inventory, at the orders coming in, at the small team of women I employed, I realized they weren't wrong. I had built something from nothing. From rock bottom. From the absolute worst night of my life. And it was growing bigger every single month. I wasn't angry at Caleb anymore. Somewhere along the way, between late nights and early mornings, between orders and designs and learning to run a business, the anger had faded. It had been replaced by something quieter. Something that felt like peace. I didn't need revenge because my success wasn't about him. It was about me. About proving to myself that I was capable and strong and worthy. That I could build a life I was proud of. And I had. The smile I gave that magazine article wasn't arrogant. It was genuine pride. Quiet, earned, deserved pride. Word reached me through old mutual friends around that time. Caleb's tech startup had collapsed. The company he'd been so proud of, the one he'd left us for, had failed completely. Investors had pulled out. Partners had walked away. He'd lost everything. He was broke and desperate and apparently living with his mother again. The first person who told me seemed to expect some kind of reaction. Maybe they thought I'd gloat, or celebrate, or feel vindicated. But I didn't feel any of those things. I just felt nothing. Empty of emotion where he was concerned. "That's unfortunate," I said simply. And I meant it. Not in a sarcastic way. Just in a truthful one. His failure didn't make me happy. It didn't make me feel better about what he'd done. It was just a fact. Something that had happened to someone I used to know. For the first time since that awful hospital room, I realized I'd truly moved on. He wasn't the villain in my story anymore. He was just a person who'd made terrible choices. And I was a person who'd survived those choices and built something beautiful anyway. That night, I sat on my porch watching my daughter play in the yard. And I felt nothing but peace. Complete, total peace. Willow and Company moved into a real office space when my daughter turned 3. We'd outgrown the house completely. We needed room for inventory, for a proper workspace for the growing team. I found a beautiful loft downtown with exposed brick walls and huge windows that let in streams of sunlight. The ceilings were high and the space was open. Perfect for the creative, collaborative environment I wanted to build. On the first day in the new office, I had the team help me hang decorations on the walls. Photos of all of us and our children. Inspirational quotes about resilience and strength. And right in the center above my desk, I hung a simple wooden sign that said, "Built from rock bottom." Every person who walked into that office would see those words. Would know that this company wasn't born from privilege or luck. It was born from pain and hard work and refusing to give up. My daughter ran through the empty space on that first day. Her laughter echoing off the high ceilings. "Mommy, it's so big," she shouted. I smiled watching her. "We're going to do big things here, baby," I said. And I meant it. We were just getting started. A message appeared in my business email inbox one Tuesday morning. The sender's name made my heart stop for just a second. Caleb Walsh. The subject line said, "Can we talk?" I stared at that email for a full minute before opening it. My hand hovered over the mouse, hesitating. Part of me wanted to delete it without reading. To keep him locked out of my life where he belonged. But curiosity won. The message was short. Hey Megan. I know it's been a long time. I heard about your business and I'm really happy for you. Truly. I made a lot of mistakes and I've had time to think about them. Can we talk? Just to clear the air. I think we both deserve closure. Caleb. I read it 3 times. Looking for manipulation. For hidden meaning. For whatever game he might be playing. But it just sounded tired. Plus, I closed the email without responding. Whatever closure he thought he needed. He'd have to find it somewhere else. I'd already found mine. In my daughter's smile. In my growing business. In the life I'd built without him. The story didn't need his voice anymore. So I hit delete and went back to work. 3 weeks after that email, my assistant knocked on my office door. She looked confused and a little uncomfortable. There's a man in the lobby asking to see you, she said. He says he knows you from before. Says it's important. My stomach dropped. Somehow I already knew who it was. I stood up from my desk, smoothing down my dress. Took a deep breath. Then walked out to the lobby. Caleb was sitting in one of the waiting area chairs. He looked different than I remembered. Thinner. Older. His suit was wrinkled and didn't fit quite right anymore. He was holding a folder that I recognized immediately as a resume. When he saw me, he stood up quickly. His eyes went wide. He looked around the office, taking in the exposed brick, the busy employees, the professional atmosphere. Then he looked back at me. Really looked at me. At my tailored clothes and confident posture. At the way my team glanced at me with respect. Megan, he said quietly. His voice cracked slightly. This is your company. I smiled calmly. Yes, it is. He just stood there, opening and closing his mouth like a fish. Finally he managed. I heard you might be hiring. I brought my resume. And just like that I understood why he'd come. Not for closure. Not to apologize. For a job. Because he was desperate and I was successful. The irony was almost funny. I kept my voice professional and even. What position are you interested in? Asked. Caleb shifted the folder in his hands nervously. I saw you're expanding your marketing department. I have experience in that area. Or operations. Or honestly, whatever's open. He tried to smile but it came out wrong. I'm flexible. My assistant was watching from behind the reception. Several of my employees had glanced up from their work, curious about the tension in the room. None of them knew who he was. To them, he was just another applicant. You'll need to submit your application through our HR department, I said calmly. They handle all hiring decisions. But Megan, I thought maybe we could. Submit it to HR, I repeated firmly. They'll review it along with all the other applications we receive. He started to say something else but I'd already turned away. Walked back toward my office with my head high and my steps steady. My heart was racing but my hands were steady. I'd faced him. Spoken to him. And I hadn't broken. Hadn't wavered. Hadn't given him anything except professional courtesy. When I reached my office, I closed the door and leaned against it. And I smiled. A real smile. Because I'd won. Not by being cruel or getting revenge. But simply by being successful. By being strong. By being everything he'd told me I could never be. I watched through my office window as Caleb left the building. He walked slowly, his shoulders slumped. His wrinkled suit jacket hanging awkwardly. He stopped on the sidewalk and looked back up at the building. At the sign above the door that said, Willow and Company. Headquarters. He stood there for a long moment. Then he got into an old car that I didn't recognize and drove away. I stood at the window, my hand resting on the glass, and realized something profound. He hadn't just lost me. He'd lost the future he'd mocked. The life he'd said was impossible. He'd told me I was too domestic, too focused on crafts and babies, too ordinary to match his ambition. And I'd proved him wrong in the most complete way possible. I'd built $1 million brand from the thing he'd dismissed. From the cute hobby he'd laughed at. From the very thing he'd said would never amount to anything. My daughter's artwork was hanging on the wall beside my desk. A crayon drawing of the two of us holding hands. I walked over and straightened the frame gently. "We did it, baby," I whispered. "We showed him." But the truth was, I hadn't done it to show him. I'd done it to show myself. To prove that I was capable. That I was strong. That I could survive the worst thing I'd ever experienced and come out better on the other side. That evening, I went home to the small house where everything had started. I'd kept it even after the business grew. Felt too important to sell. Too much a part of our story. My daughter was 5 now, in kindergarten, full of energy and questions. She was sitting at the kitchen table coloring when I walked in. "Mommy," she shouted, running to hug my legs. "Are you a boss?" she asked, looking up at me with those big, curious eyes. I smiled and picked her up. "Something like that," I said. "I run a company. That means I'm in charge of making sure everyone has what they need to do their jobs." "That sounds important," she said seriously. "It is important," I agreed. "But you know what's more important." "What?" "Being your mom. That's the most important job I'll ever have." She hugged me tight and I held her close, breathing in the smell of her shampoo and crayons. This was what mattered. Not revenge. Not proving anything to Caleb. Just this. Just her. Just the life we'd built together from nothing. We were happy. We were stable. We were loved. And that was everything. That was enough. More than enough. It was perfect. 5 years after Caleb walked out of that hospital room, I stood at a podium in front of 200 people. It was Willow and Company's 5th anniversary celebration. Employees, investors, retailers, and press had all gathered to mark the milestone. My daughter sat in the front row next to Natalie, both of them smiling up at me. I looked out at the crowd and felt overwhelmed with gratitude. For everyone who'd believed in me. For everyone who'd helped me build this. For the second chance I'd given myself. "Sometimes life doesn't hand you closure," I said into the microphone. My voice was steady and clear. "It hands you a choice. To rebuild or to break. To let your pain define you or to let it refine you." 5 years ago I was at the lowest point of my life. I had nothing except my daughter and a dream that everyone told me was impossible. Paused looking at my daughter. She gave me a thumbs up. I chose to build. I chose to believe that I was capable of more than anyone thought. Including myself. And this company, this family we've created together, is proof that sometimes the worst moments in our lives can become the foundation for our greatest achievements. The applause was deafening. My daughter ran up to the stage and I lifted her into my arms. She whispered in my ear, "I'm proud of you, Mommy." And I whispered back, "I'm proud of us." Because that's what this really was. Not revenge. Not proving anyone wrong. Just two people who'd been left behind. Who'd decided to build something beautiful anyway. He'd left when I was at my weakest. He'd come back when I was at my strongest. And that's exactly how life returns the favor.